Hello, yes, it's Salah Nasri here, and yes, I have a special announcement. The Game of Chips has just hit 5,000 orders on Amazon. Thank you to everyone who placed the order. The book was just released in December, so I'm very, very grateful and surprised to date. If you are someone who is intrigued, curious about how the semiconductor ecosystem works from beginning to where we are right now, this book was written with you in mind. So order it, read it, and it is pretty much a handbook of the whole ecosystem. In the meantime, enjoy the next episode and don't forget to hit that subscribe button.
The silicon budget today, if you're buying the most popular GPU or the infrastructure, for each gigawatt, it is over $30 billion.
Chiplets, freedom or fragmentation, pick one.
That standards are going to solve the chiplet problem, and you can do, and the library of chiplets is, I think, there's still challenges we have to go solve.
Our guest today is Raja Koduri, founder and CEO of Oxmiq Labs.
He has led architecture decisions where cost, scale, and physics collide. This conversation examines what breaks when systems grow faster than assumptions.
The higher the bandwidth between two chiplets, the harder it is to standardize. I call it premature optimization. Is spending extra transistors, extra logic to simplify software is a choice I don't compromise on.
Hello, and welcome back to the Semiconductor Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Salah Nasri, and whether you are an industry veteran or someone who's just curious about the semiconductor manufacturing ecosystem, this is your podcast. Before I start this session today, I have a small favor to ask you all. We, in a very short time, and when we started this podcast in January, have hit more than 200,000 views. But when I look at the back end, only just about 4,000 subscribers we have on YouTube and 10,000 subscribers we have on Spotify. I need you to do me that little favor. Hit that subscribe button, because the more subscribers we get, the more influential and the more noise and impact we can make on the global ecosystem in semiconductor manufacturing. So, without further ado, today I have a very special guest, a dear friend of mine. We have Raja Koduri, the CEO of Oxmiq. And I have the great fortune to be in San Francisco, well, in the Bay Area, and I'm here at the headquarters of Oxmiq. Raja, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Salah. Thank you for visiting us, and it's always, fun catching up with you and hanging out with you.
Yes, indeed. I mean, Raja, if we go back in time a little bit, during my time at Stanford, we already did a podcast, right? And when I went to release the podcast, at the time you were at stealth mode. Mm-hmm. And when I was just about to release it, you announced that you're out there in the world. So first of all, congratulations, number one. And for the audience out there who are not familiar with Raja Koduri or Oxmiq, I'd like to start off with a rapid fire question round with you.
Sure.
You ready?
Yeah.
Cool. Let's go. In one line, what problem is Oxmiq solving first?
We want to enable the world of silicon design with an IP that is missing in the IP library today, which is any semiconductor design team to build a GPU-compatible chip and software stack and ship it. So what we realized, the big problem or gap is there is ARM for CPUs, but there is no ARM for GPUs. They are fabulous silicon companies, like, great companies, NVIDIA, AMD, and others with chips that are compatible with I call the GPU programming model. And I'm sure we'll get into what that means versus all the AI chips. But we realized that, hey, there is no IP company to enable the whole world of silicon designers that are not just sitting here in Bay Area. They are in India, they are in, Asia, they're all Europe. Anyone can license our IP and build a chip. And that's the problem we are trying to solve.
Wow. I want to dig a little bit deeper in there. We'll dig deeper during the midst of the podcast. Hardware or software? Where's the bigger bottleneck in your business today, Raja?
It's really interesting in our business, right? That the hardware and software are so, kind of tied at the hip. Okay. And much of I call it the people who make mistakes entering into the AI space and who think that hardware and software are two separate things and two separate investments or two separate architectures end up, going down the wrong path. And the primary reason why NVIDIA is so successful is because the software architecture and the hardware architecture are one and the same thing. So there is the hardware reflects the software architecture. So we are one of the few people with our background in history that understand it. And this is a hard thing for me to explain to the world who separate hardware and software as if they're two separate things. That, I build a chip, I build a hardware, and then I had a bunch of software people to type software, right? And that, I think as we go through today's discussion, I'll try and in not simple term, in the why is the abstractions? What are the abstractions that drive this, parallel computing, massively parallel computing? Together, and why hardware and software are so tightly tied at the hip and not separated from each other, and how we evolve hardware and software together. So that's the principle of Oxmiq Labs in one sentence. It's a great question you're asking because we, from day one, we avoided using the term, there is a hardware team and there is a software team and there's a hardware software, even though we are tempted to, because that's the terminology used, that it's a common unified architecture for hardware and software that we're building.
I see. And okay, again, we're gonna you're putting in a lot of golden nuggets here, Raja. This podcast later on, after the rapid fire, is going to get a little bit more warmed up. When you look at your solution, OXCORE, what is it in a single word? One single word. How would you describe OXCORE?
It is the new computing core, okay, that encapsulates scalar, vector, or, we call it SIMT, and matrix computing into one unified computing abstraction. Today, they are separate abstractions. And we unified, scalar means like CPU style processing.
Yes.
And vector SIMT is the classic GPU style processing like CUDA. And matrix is the tensor TPU like thing, right? So you can think of it as a single core that encapsulates CPU, GPU, and a TPU into one unified architecture.
I see. Then you have OXPython, which is another interesting one. What's OXPython's killer promise?
So what we realized very early on when we, when I got out of my corporate life and got back to doing hands-on work, my first, project was, hey, let's understand how this whole AI software stack works, right? And, we bought a bunch of GPUs, all vendors, NVIDIA, AMD, Intel, Tenstor, and etc. And we started, I don't like doing kind of, standalone research. So we picked a problem which is near and dear to me, which is, hey, content creation is going to be disrupted by AI, and I have, some investments and engagements with the India creative ecosystem. I'm actually wearing, a shirt of one of the top franchises, movie franchises in India that I had a, role to play. And said, how would a content creator take advantage of AI, and how would we, deliver them local AI, that runs on their edge, and they control their data and privacy and all that stuff. So we said, okay, can we do this on a non-NVIDIA GPUs or non-NVIDIA hardware, so that we can bring the cost of the capital and all down. And we quickly found out that it was impossible. Okay, that even some installers wouldn't work on non-NVIDIA hardware. So and then we dug deep into the entire PyTorch ecosystem, Python, PyTorch, and all the levels of ecosystem. And what we realized was, technically there is a layer called CUDA, and everybody gives you a simple answer. Oh yeah, everything is all CUDA and all the stuff. But the layer called CUDA, that is like, the underlying abstraction that which all these things map to, isn't the only problem. The assumptions around NVIDIA architecture and CUDA have spread at all levels of the stack. And I call it jokingly the CUDA virus, right? So the virus is spread and you don't even know you have it, right? Much of the software people who do interesting work, they don't know they are writing code that would only work on NVIDIA, okay? And so we realized that, oh, this is the problem. So, all my, last decade or so, as a hardware person, we were attacking the problem bottom up. What I mean by that is I have a chip, chips have drivers, they are interfaces, right? Oh, there is low-level interface called CUDA. What is my equivalent of CUDA? AMD has ROCm. By the way, initiative started by me there. Intel has one API. Another initiative started by me, right? And the stuff. And so we were going bottom up, right, to kind of catch up with NVIDIA. But what happened is that all the layers above, many layers above, are actually even a bigger problem than the bottom layers, right? So we said, this is interesting. I didn't realize it, that, all these top layers got infested with the CUDA virus. And they're not going to change. You can't overnight say, there are a million models today on Hugging Face, right? With, the various infestations of CUDA virus. You can't just say, oh, all the models need to be rewritten or whatever, right? We said, but we have, everything is coming through Python, right? So the vaccination layer could be Python, right? Let everybody stay in the CUDA land and address the different architectural backends through Python interpreter. So Python is interpreted language, as you know, right? So that's the genesis of OXPython, where we said, Python is open source, and I can help not only the ecosystem, but eventually our own IP by kind of inoculating the world from the CUDA virus at the Python level. So that's the genesis of the OXPython idea. And once we validated our idea with a proof of concept, we said, let's test it by trying to actually bring up a real hardware through this path. And that's resulted in a partnership with Tenstorrent, a challenging piece of hardware that is not a GPU, and can we get, interesting amount of workloads, models, and PyTorch and all that stuff running through that. And, we delivered that, the first phase of that, and now we're doing second phase of that contract. So, it's a long answer, but that's what OXPython is. The genesis that in the Python ecosystem, all the, the various workloads that flow through, we can, kind of redirect them to the appropriate destination, even if the sources have CUDA infestation.
Marvelous. Are there any? I mean, are there any other companies that are doing the same thing that you're aware of from your perspective? That
I mean, there are this problem of, hey, I want to express a computation at high level and map it to productively to various architectures problem.
Yes.
There are multiple people working on it. Actually, the most ambitious attempt at that's going on right now is, my friend Chris Latner's company, Modular, and, Mojo, right? And Chris I'm a big fan of him. He's thinking it, right? Hey, let's create a clean new framework, that retains, the familiarity of Python and other languages. But, I call jokingly, like, Chris is like a builder of new roads. Right, like in the stuff like in a new frame, he did that with LLVMs, Swift, and other stuff, and he's got sufficiently frustrated with the the entropy of the current software stack, how crazily the whole Python, PyTorch, and library ecosystem has grown, and it's that's a topic in itself that we can talk for hours and hours on the difficulty of getting a robust, stable execution environment, even on NVIDIA, by the way, is not simple, right? That's why you have to download a container of all the libraries and interconnects and all. So he's trying to solve the problem. So anyway, it's kudos to him because, he lays new roads. But, the challenge always is, once the road is there and nice and smooth, nobody notices it, right? And the stuff. So how do you get paid for the road versus, the car type of stuff? But I'm cheering, for Chris to succeed and kind of a cleaner framework, because our vision of what we're trying to do with our IP is very much aligned. What we took was a pragmatic intermediate step to help the existing kind of, messy infrastructure to also map, right? So we're not, it may look competitive with some of these other efforts. That's not what we're trying to do. Because when we talk about OXCORE and some of the, the vision behind it, you will understand how we are building a infrastructure that is agnostic of languages. Okay, so we can support any new language that comes our way. And the thinner the software stack gets, the less entropy there is in the software stack, the better it is for us, for all of us.
I see. So, okay. First sanity check after a new runtime drop. What would it be?
After
what? So you a first sanity check after a new runtime drop.
A new runtime.
Yes.
What do you mean?
So from a runtime drop perspective is when you're okay. The next one I would say is actually even better. Most overrated GPU metric.
Oh, most overrated GPU metric. Maybe flops. Okay. Let me put it this way, right? It's not overrated for people who understand what it means, but it's singularly being used by many to quote, with the chest bragging stuff. And singularly, it's kind of most, became a more meaningless metric. And, the part of the GPU marketing and and our good friend, Jensen's hyperbole around 4.5 petaflops, 10 petaflops, this stuff. So everybody's attention is on flops, right? But when what we know that things like memory bandwidth and memory capacity have a much more significant role to play in in AI, right? So it is diverting people from the real, where the value is.
So then the next contrary question would be, what is the underrated one? What is the underrated GPU metric?
The real utilization of all the transistors we are packing, right? The quantifying the utilization on key workloads and yeah, that for the next 5 years, right? Those who crack utilization, whether you're chip guy, silicon guy, system guy, software guy, or a service provider, I believe that that's going to be who's the winners and losers will be in the utilization thing. And we can talk about that and why and what are the the foundational physics that are going on and the demand. It's amazing the time we live in, right? It's like there is never ever been such a incredible demand, doubling of the compute demand every year, more than doubling of the stuff for like silicon. So the space you're operating in and the community that you're building, it's the golden age for them, for everybody, right? Every component in the stuff. So here is to just give you a numerical perspective on the demand, right? Not just the hyperbole on English, right? In numbers, just on inference, right? So the token demand. Okay, the token demand, the trajectory we are on, actually, I think Sundar, Google said their monthly token generation is already at the scale of 10 power 15. Okay, 10 power 15. That is, quadrillion, tokens a monthly basis. So before 2030, the trajectory is going to 10 power 18, okay, tokens per year. Okay. So it's, some say it's, 2 times 10 power 18, 3 times 10 power 18, doesn't matter. I'm ignoring the first integer, just saying the scale is 10 power 18 for a year. Okay. Today, each token roughly costs you 1 joule, right, of energy. Yeah. Okay. And if you just do the math on that per second, the total infrastructure I need to support this token demand is multiple 100 gigawatts. Okay. Now, if you kind of step back, why is this crazy deals being made by everybody for, there are gigawatt data center deals happening across the world, right? Whether it's in Middle East, I'm involved in a couple of initiatives in India or US, right? So there is this entire race going on to capture energy and data centers because the demand is a couple of 100 gigawatts at least, right? At a conservative stuff. So the scale is huge. Now, let's talk about what is the capital required to build a 1 gigawatt data center from silicon perspective. Okay, so the silicon budget today, if we buying the most popular GPU or the infrastructure, for each gigawatt, it is over $30 billion.
Wow.
Right? So, your infrastructure cost to provision energy, provision everything, right, depending on the geography you are in, is in the 10 to, $15 billion range. But your silicon cost is in 35, right? So for it to become practical to the entire world, the silicon cost has to come down, right, to match the energy and the infrastructure cost, and it will, right. The competitive dynamics and part of the reason why we are doing OXMIQ is to enable various the competitive set of people to do their chiplets, systems, packages. Is it has to come down at least by a third, by a fourth, for us to be able to, the world to be able to build this 100 gigawatt type in the stuff. So if you just imagine one gigawatt is $50 billion all put together, 100 gigawatts. It's 5 trillion or something like that. It's just crazy numbers, right? And the stuff. So it has to come down because this token consumption is assuming, right? Like, we are enabling countries like India to consume tokens and all. So the dollar per million tokens need to come down to few cents for the world to afford those, right? Just like what happened with mobile internet. Now we have almost 1 billion people in India with smartphones and are connected to the mobile internet. In US, in Silicon Valley, my monthly data rate plans are in the $50 to $60 range. So if it is $50, $60 range for a monthly, broadband internet plan on my phone, you won't get 1 billion people in India, right? It has to be, $1 or $2 or something. And we achieved that, right? While the operators are being very profitable too, right? It's not, in the stuff, right? So it's exactly similar thing has to play out for this whole, people's projection of AI everywhere, and the multiple billion people doing some form of AI, some form of token consumption on their daily lives. So the scale of these numbers have to come down to be affordable by the whole world. Today, it's still in pioneer stage, frankly, right? With all the hype, the rich countries and the rich labs and all can afford these token rates, but we have to bring it to the common man. It has to come down dramatically.
Chiplets, freedom or fragmentation? Pick one.
Freedom or fragmentation? Can you?
Which you had to describe chiplets? How would you describe it? Would you describe it from a perspective that it's an element of freedom now, or would you describe it as a form of fragmentation now?
So I often kind of half-jokingly say that people who are everyone who is super excited about chiplets are the ones who haven't done them yet. And it's appropriate time to show this, right? As we had 47 chiplets on a single package here on Ponte Vecchio. So I fortunately or unfortunately have the scars on the back for driving chiplets all the way from HPM1 to Ponte Vecchio, and a lot of lessons and lots of learnings on what works and what are the difficult stuff with chiplets. So I'm a little cautious about the world's excitement about chiplets, because yes, they deliver some great value proposition, right? If you get them right, but you doing a chiplet and me doing a chiplet and expecting them to hey, they'll come together and I'll put them together and they'll work, right? If we just have a standard is okay. No. Even within my own team, there was challenges to get chiplets to all align and work, right? So I say the standards, that standards are going to solve the chiplet problem, and you can do, and the library of chiplets is, I think, there are still challenges we have to go solve. But I am optimistic about chiplets, and my message to the community who is on working on chiplets is, give a very high priority to validation. Whoever is your other chiplet partners, you guys need to sit down right from architecture time to right through the execution. There are a lot of details you need to align, and it's not just, I'm UCAE, you're UCAE, and they'll come together and they'll work. No. There are some physicality elements. There are lots of details that need to be worked out up front for those things to work together. And there are practical issues. If you're, a separate company, I'm a separate company, you build a chiplet, and your chiplet, you can't sell your chiplet until my chiplet is ready, right? And that's a big, so two companies' execution is tied to their revenues, right? And that's another big planning issue, right? And so anyway, there are lots of both financial execution and technical detail issues that need to be sorted out before this vision of chiplets, that you build a chiplet for X and I build a chiplet for Y, and they'll come together and, a product comes out, coming together. And one of my, the thing I say is the more the bandwidth, the higher the bandwidth between two chiplets, okay? the harder it is to standardize. Right? So if it is low bandwidth interconnect, right, like, DDR style, PCIe level stuff, you can standardize. When we get to this multi-terabytes per second type things between talking to them, they are, very fine. They need to be very close to each other, right? So the more closer you and I need to be, right, in the stuff, right, then, like, standards get in the way. It's like, okay, we are like practically in the stuff. So we have to sit down and, align on the wiring and power and thermals and blah, blah, blah and all, because we keep, we get into each other's stuff, right? Yeah. The heat you generate will be my problem. The heat I generate would be your problem. So we also need to align on various things. The more tighter, more closer we get to each other.
Love it. One design choice you'll never compromise on.
One design choice that I never compromise on. I call it premature optimization. Okay, is spending extra transistors, extra logic to simplify software is a choice I don't compromise on, right? If it can help software become simple, happy to spend those transistors.
Brilliant. One KPI that proves TCO actually improved.
One KPI. That's a great question, actually, because I think we are, the scale of AI data centers, right, is changing the equation dramatically, right, with multiple zeros added. Right now, it used to be the OPEX, which is like, your performance per watt, right, type metrics, right, your energy metrics dominated the TCO for kind of, the previous, data center, legacy data centers. In the AI data center space, because my CapEx is so high, right? Like, $30 billion for a 1 gigawatt data center, right? So my amortization also, like, the rate at which the new architectures, even NVIDIA is releasing, or every 2 years, there is, from Hopper to Blackwell to Vera Rubin. So really my amortization cycles are also short, right? So the performance or the value delivered per dollar and the value delivered per watt are both have become equally important, or actually even more so. Actually, the performance per dollar is very, very, with the 30 billion capex, like, that if I can get the same performance at a fraction of cost, you're generating gold for me, right? And the stuff. So the capex dollar optimization is becoming a major part of TCO now than it was before.
Raja, a partnership that would 10x your roadmap today, who would it be with?
Oh, great question. Partnership that would 10x my roadmap. It would be with an energy company.
Wow.
So where, interestingly, right, the whole journey where, if you look at the abstraction of what's going on, right, is, see, it is, the most of world's energy, interestingly, right, comes from photons, right? Like, that whether they are, what you call solar or, right, the other forms of energy, sun has a role to play, right? The earth wouldn't exist. Any shape or form of energy in earth wouldn't exist without the sun. So I call it like, the source is photons, right? And we are converting photons to electrons, right? You know, and we are kind of measuring them in terms of, like, say, Joule's form, right? And now we have a transformation engine that takes these electrons, okay, and is converting to tokens. And the transformation engine is, we are calling silicon, right? GPU, TPU, whatever, right? So we have a conversion engine from electrons to tokens. And then the tokens, you know, you put application layers, agentic layers, whatever, right? You know, that tokens are the unit by which we are delivering a lot of value, right? I mean, that's kind of the trajectory we are on. So it's really the fundamental source is still electrons, right? Or photons to electrons, right? That is the power. And the silicon is the transformation engine. And the IP and the stuff that I'm working on is, you know, bringing that, the cost of that conversion, democratize the cost of that conversion, or in fact, democratize that conversion, right? You know, it's like OXCORE and OXQuilt and some of the IPs we are working on, including the software stack. If I just take a physics abstraction, is we are letting you, say you're an energy company, hey, convert your electrons to tokens. And we want to put that power in your control, right? And, like, you know, bring that stuff. So then the value is still with energy, right? Which is the foundational constraint that we have.
So a wonderful way to put it. I didn't even ponder on that solution, but great answer, Raja. So if you had 10% more budget this quarter, what would you do with it?
If I have 10% more budget just this quarter, this stuff, we would probably spend a bit more on capital, right? You know, that to increase our simulation speed, to get our, you know, IP and our software making forward progress. So yeah, we would probably end up spending it on hardware.
On hardware. So I'd be intrigued. We spoke about the GPU metrics. I'd be intrigued to know from your perspective, what is the most overhyped term in AI compute today?
AI.
It's a good one. And what's the most underhyped?
Math, right? You know, the foundational, just, there not enough people are educating people on it's all multiply and adds and why it's important for you to really kind of understand the math. And of course, you know, physics, connected physics behind it. And I think this kind of making it simple for the whole world to understand, and educating both the, upcoming students, on the foundations of what's going on, without the hype of, AI is this some magical thing, is very important. Because for this thing, for us to conquer the fear of, if it is treated as black box, that it's 50-50 in terms of positive and negative, right? I am more on the, the AI and, what all this form of computing will help humanity and will enrich our lives in more ways than we can imagine. But that can only happen if it is less of a black box for everybody, right? That the more black boxes there are more operators that can play there and be, evil and, try to gain advantage, right? So less black boxes there are, less, just open it up, and part of opening it up, just like we've done with science, right? It was beautiful. Like if you see the 1,000 years of science, right? Newton discovered something or an Einstein discovered something. They put the equations, they published, and spread it to the world, and we understand, and then people build on top of it. So it needs to be that way because it is so foundational, right, to our future.
What's or could you share a failure that improved your architecture playbook?
Oh, there are so many. There, that you've been long enough. But I'd say the most important one, in fact, we call this a success or a failure, and all. You can interpret it many different ways. What the Ponte Vecchio project, right? We signed up for an extremely kind of an ambitious, aggressive target, right? We started in 2019 to deliver a full supercomputer in 2022, right? In less than 3 years, and Intel never done a GPU architecture, right? Of this scale, so brand new architecture, brand new design team. I built the whole team up from kind of scratch, brand new software stack, because Intel didn't have a legacy kind of high performance GPU stack, and brand new process technology, right? It was supposed to be on what was called Intel 7 nanometer, brand new packaging technology, right? The 3D stacking and all the stuff hasn't been done before. So there were so many brand news. So first off, you can look at me and say, are you insane? To kind of, get so many brand new things in and, try to get it right, the stuff, right? And so the first thing is your risk stacking, right? At some point, the risk stacking somewhere, then there'll be a weak link that would fail. And despite all this, what was amazing about this project is all the hard things worked the first time, right? I'd say, what are the hard things that the physics things, right? Actually, there's one hard thing that didn't work, and we had to kind of pivot midway, which is the Intel 7 nanometer didn't work. And we, midway through the project, took the compute tile to TSMC 5 nanometer. Okay. So that was big pivot. Midway through, after we taped out that chip, or taped in, because it's internal foundry at Intel, and we got the first silicon back, we had to take the design and map it to TSMC and do that. So, so that in the physics realm, that didn't work. But everything else, the 3D stacking, packaging, the 4 rows, the power delivery, all of these things were surprisingly, they all worked, right? The things that surprised us, or with bugs, are the mundane things that you would, because see, when you're working on a new problem and, you pick the hard things, right? So there is so much of mental energy goes on to the things that you believe are the hard things. And what happens is the ones that you consider easy things, right? You kind of, say, that's okay, right? I don't pay. But my lesson learned is the easy things may be the ones that bite you, right? It is, as somebody said, the famous quote, it's it is what you don't know doesn't kill you. What you know doesn't kill you. What you think you know, but you actually don't, is the one that kills you, right? And the stuff, right? So in that, we had, I'll tell you on this thing, a company like Intel, how many times have they done PCIe, right? The design teams. We had bugs on PCIe, right? To, revving the stuff, right? We had bugs on, HBM and all. So the mundane things are the ones that kill you. So when you take a verification, so, the big lesson, or a thing that I took, is that the most important thing for anybody who's listening to this podcast and being in the silicon stuff, the most valuable thing, especially in the, as we enter the age of AI, which will also impact the silicon design and all, is your verification plan. Yeah. Your verification plan, you need to put your most senior, your biggest neurons, including if you're a leader, your own neurons, right? 90% of your time should be spent on verification, 10% on, design and having fun, right? I call it fun. Okay, yeah. Writing code, writing and this stuff, that's the fun. Verification is a really, really big challenge as the complexity of what we are all building is increasing, which is great, right? Because the demand is great, high flop density, high bandwidth density, SerDes we are pushing, we are going beyond 200 gig SerDes, right? Every element of a modern AI compute machine is at the edge of physics. So verification becomes super duper important, way more so than before. And what happened is many companies, the verification people are like, kind of the lower, right? They're not, if you look at even the pay scales and all, verification is lower than the design guys and architects and all. I think it needs to, move up. Verification should be the topmost paid thing. And verification is where, mark my words, is where our employment, as humans, right? I don't see verification being replaced by AI agents. Everything else in the pipeline, a lot of other things can be replaced by AI. We are already, as a startup, that's a separate, maybe an entire podcast we can do on impact AI is having and what we are doing with AI, the whole development. But anyway, my life's lesson learned is like, verification. Like verification.
It saves you the cost.
Kind of stuff.
Raja, what's your hello world for Oxmiq developers out there?
As an IP company, right, we operate through our customers. So we're not B2C, even though we have some interesting B2C projects like, Capsule that we put out a couple of weeks ago. So there are some tools that we develop that, are great, we are using and we say, oh, let's kind of, contribute to the world. So there are some, direct to consumer things that we do. But the hello world will be my customer, right? One of, let's say, somebody who's building a chip gets a drop of my IP, right? Integrate it into their, development infrastructure in a day, and they can take any, piece of software, agentic software that is, running on Python, PyTorch, kind of CUDA ecosystem, and start running tests within 24 hours, right? Any test that is out there, that, they can download a model from Hugging Face and say, run, and it just works, right? No, hand holding and no manual conversion. And we that's what internally, that's the milestone we now reached internally. Now, having to do that, somebody external outside us can replicate it would be a big hello world moment for us. That would be like a huge, moment.
Huge success. Yeah. Success story. I would say, if you could finish the sentence, greatest GPU software is... Or simplify, great GPU software is...
As an engineer, right, I struggle with such statements because GPU software is not one, monolithic or like, one piece, right? It is many layers of the stack and many APIs, right? Of course, in the compute world, it was dominated, the lowest level abstraction was dominated by this thing called CUDA, right, and the stuff. So I have no issue there. I probably say CUDA because it is the abstraction that is co-architected with hardware. So that is the most shiny example that is out there of hardware-software co-architecture. And that's no reason. That's actually the reason why it's successful, not because, yes, NVIDIA has done many things right on, supporting it, promoting it, teaching, but technically the reason why it survived so long and continues is it's the hardware and the CUDA abstraction were co-architected.
So on that point of view, what's one piece of advice that you have to teams trying to make CUDA era code portable?
Pay attention to the fundamentals, right? So separate out the math. Okay, so there is these are all math execution machines. Essentially we are running multiply and adds at a petaflops of them. But the memory hierarchy is what it's all about, right? So everybody's math engines look more or less the same, right? Because the multiply and add is a multiply and add, but you have memory hierarchy, you have registers, you have SRAM caches, you have near memory, you have far memory. Okay. So when you look at the mapping the workload and all, it is really all of the CUDA Ninja code is all about, getting most out of the memory hierarchy. Right. All of the CUDA code is like clever ways to get more out of the memory hierarchy because my far memory is 10 times slower, maybe actually 100 times slower than my closest hierarchy of memory, whether it's registers or cache. So when you have, a range of 100x between far memory and my closest memory tier, it's all about how you schedule your work, how you bring the data in, and how you keep it as long as possible in your nearest memory and run. That's the game today, right? That's why I said earlier in the stuff, people talk about flops are easy. It is, that how I optimize my data fetches and how I reuse as much data as possible, how I avoid using the slow tiers of memory as much as I can't avoid completely. I have to load my weights from or whatever stuff from there, right? Because they start there.
Yes.
But how do I avoid refetching it? How do I kind of, all the clever algorithms, including, your flash attentions, your MXFP4s, all of the big inventions and innovations that happened in the AI space have been around, this conservation of memory.
Thank you for the rapid fire round question. So let's get a bit more deeper into the discussion, Raja. Let's say, so basically, if we look at your career from ATI, AMD, Apple, Intel, to now founding OXMIQ, what would you say is like the inflection points from your side of things that shaped your philosophy on graphics, compute, and now preparing for teams at scale?
Yeah, that's a interesting question, right? The abstraction I use for my career trajectory, right, is like kind of an educational one. I say, right, I'd say my entire career pre-Apple was like primary education and high school. You can that I kind of summarize in this stuff. Apple was the is the one that really shaped me, that really kind of rewired my neurons, right? It's almost like you go to university, you do your 4 years, right? And it's coincidentally happened to be kind of little over 4 years at Apple. And I like came out a very different person, right? Then I went in. So what Apple taught me, or that is looking at practically every problem, everything from a user perspective. right? But prior to that, I grew up with a technology perspective, right? It's like taking, like, say, hey, we built a GPU with so many teraflops, and next year I want to do 2 teraflops. Or this. So the technical metrics and how to push the envelope forward on, the key technologies. Apple completely changed, my thinking, that exposure to, how to look at everything from user perspective, right? But once you learn that, right, just like university, and the stuff, I had to get out on the real world, right? Just staying at the university and the stuff was, and that's also part of the rewiring of the brain, right? People ask me many times when I left Apple too, Apple was amazing and the stuff. Why would you leave? Right at this time, right, in the stuff, and that's actually the answer was precisely because, right, once you learn the stuff, you have to put it into action, into practice. I was dying to apply everything I learned, right, in the external world. So that led me back to AMD. And AMD at that time was very, 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 it was. Many people used to say they were near bankruptcy, right? A dollar stock. I think, the day I started was a dollar stock or something like that, or like, $1 billion market cap. So it was like a shock to, many people, including my own family, right? My own family said, hey, what's wrong? Is this your midlife crisis? Right? Maybe you should see a shrink, right? And the stuff, right? Because it was like, going from, right, world's #1 company to, world's number whatever, right, and the stuff, right? It was just a magical thing. But the, the shaping of, Apple was the big transformation thing. AMD, I would say my, second stint at AMD and running the Radeon group and the, resurrecting the GPU, I would say is my first love, right? You never forget your, first love. And the stuff. So, very, not only fond memories, fond stuff of AMD. And, I carry that, you can see this, the car with a Radeon. I had a, Radeon nameplate for my car for years. And,
you still have it?
I still have it. And, I also keep my, a beautiful black and red business card of, the
Radeon there.
So that's my, so AMD taught me or gave me an opportunity to, develop me on how to build a culture, right? So non-tech, there was lots of technical challenges. We did HBM1, we did first chiplets. We laid out I helped laid out the roadmap for what is the MI series, right? ROCm, right? So many seeds that grew into fruits, and they're delivering for AMD. All the seeds were planted during my 4 years at AMD. So very proud of what we did there in a very difficult circumstances of not having the budgets, not having the resources that our competitors had, and yet we kind of were very, very creative, very, very innovative on that stuff. So that's the fond memory. The Intel phase, I call it actually is PhD phase, right? So and like you'll hear from many PhDs, right? People will tell you about their PhDs, it's a mixed bag. It's not always right. Oh, my PhD was a bed of roses. No PhD is a bed of roses. It is right. A lot of pressure, struggle, and when you're going to get out, your advisors, your this, your that, and all right. PhDs are hard, right, and the stuff. And I'd say it's that the PhD phase of my career, because it brought everything together, because being inside a company that has makes their own transistor, makes their own packaging, all the way to a product and the software stuff, it completed my education, right, really, right, because in being in fabless companies, you only see one end of it, right? And many, foundational things that you understand when you are in a company that is manufacturing stuff, I would have not learned being outside, right, and the stuff. So that's my kind of, I'd say. And once you finish PhD, you have to put, hey, should I retire? Or actually, no, I feel like, Gen AI happened and all. I felt like, the next 20 years will be way more fun than the past 20 years. So, I had to do my own thing and a startup and all that stuff, right? So that's why we are here.
Remarkable. So, I wanted to go a little bit deeper from what you were talking about early on in terms of what OXMIQ Labs is doing and what convinced you that the timing was right as well. Could you share more about that in terms of the timing of you now, releasing to the world about OXMIQ?
Yeah. So, I'd be honest, right? Any startup in the early stages, right? You pick a problem statement, you look at the stuff, you play around, and you pivot a few times, right? That is the nature of the stuff because, there may be a technical problem that is very important and, you can go, but it also has to intersect with, filling a business need, right? At a given point of time. So, we definitely went through in the past 2 years kind of, several trajectories. And then there is also, and this is more advice to, entrepreneurs or people who want to get into the startups and all. You may believe in a particular problem statement and, it's very important, you think you can solve it. But finding the intersection that the VCs and your capital supporters may think the problem is something else, right? And even though you may feel that you know about this problem way more than they do because you're in the thick of things, it doesn't really matter. You still have to, for you to raise enough money and all that stuff, there has to be that intersection stuff. And in some ways, you can say our timing is right. In some ways, our timing is also not right because a lot of the VC money, capital money, has been invested in many startups, right? Almost 20 plus AI hardware startups, right? In the prior year. So they are still waiting to see returns from them.
Yeah.
So we look like, from a simplistic standpoint, we look like, you're a 21st startup. And of course, you're going to say, you're better than all of them and, you'll solve the software problem, you'll be this, that, and all that stuff. But, from a simplistic point of view, we are 21st, right? And they already have their in the stuff. So that was challenging because they're all looking to see some returns from their prior big checks that they've written. Some companies are in Series B, Series C, Series D, Series C, and, haven't yet kind of, returned any investment to them. So, anyway, like, the timing, it's there are, two sides of the coin for timing always and stuff.
I mean, it's interesting you mentioned that because, if you look at the landscape, right, NVIDIA has just put such a powerful moat out there from, as you explained early on, especially from the CUDA playbook, as one would say. But, you've got these other companies. You've got like Cerebras, you've got Samba Nova System, you've got Tensorin as you're working with them. You've got Grok as well. There's another Korean one that just popped up recently, Rebellion. There's just so many out there. And as you mentioned, most of them are like, hitting this Series D 1 billion plus valuation.
Yes.
Now, what do you, does that concern you from that perspective in terms of the amount of players that are now in the game? Or?
No, actually, it is actually great for us because, see, and this was a very hard choice, we made to be an IP-only company, right? So because all of them, every name you mention is my potential future customer. If they continue to persist on their paths and they're doing new iterations, I want them to take a look at the IP and say, hey, if they integrate my IP into their, whether it's wafer scale and all, would that enable them to get more business more faster? That's good for me, right? That's my strategy is more of them they are, and the more like kind of, capital funded they are, good for me because I can help them. Right, we can complement them with stuff that we know to bridge the gap they have with the NVIDIA ecosystem. Think of it simply, right? All of them are trying to take some percentage out of the NVIDIA, TAM, right? And let's actually step back to answer the question: what is the TAM for all of this stuff? It's crazy, right? It's basically never in the history of the entire world, okay, not just silicon, any company that crossed a double-digit billion-dollar revenue, right, kept doubling 4 years in a row, right? You see NVIDIA's revenue doubling. We would be ecstatic when a company, increases by 20% year over year on revenues and their stock would go up. This is a company that is doubling in revenue. And they are still not able to supply to the whole demand. They are leaving almost $50 billion on the table for, others to go get, right? Whether it is AMD, TPUs, or Cerebras, or stuff in there. Okay, so we are in this extraordinary time where the demand so much exceeds supply. So can a few more of them have interesting billion-dollar businesses? Potentially, right? But if we make the software story easier, if we make the match with CUDA ecosystem easier, they could all make money, and we can also make money as a licensee of the core and participate in the whole thing. Of course, my investors ask me, hey, Raj, if you build the chip itself, if you build the whole thing itself, you can get billions, right? in the stuff. Why are you kind of targeting, tens of millions or hundreds of millions on IP license stuff? But that is the foundation. See, if I decide to be an IP company and want to enable the whole ecosystem to make the billions, and I get my, share that I deserve on the IP front, it's a very profitable company, and, we have proof in ARM. Very successful. Now they are IPO'd and, they are multi-$100 billion company. So I believe that even as an IP player, if all of my customers are successful, I get my, share with licensing revenues, some royalties and all that stuff. And it's a great business to be in. But if I become greedy and I say, oh, I want to participate in the 100, 200 and all, then I'm not an IP company. I'm not enabling the whole ecosystem. Right. So that's why I'm not, like I said, that more of these companies stand and continue. They all look like customers to me, now or down the lane.
You have this, this term in terms of relating to the re-architecturing of the GPU stack. So Oxmiq is saying that it's rebuilding the GPU full stack from atoms to agents. What does that practically mean?
Yeah.
Could you elaborate more on that?
So, so the current software stack, right, that got built over years on GPUs, and in fact, this holds good for CPUs and all, right? So we kept the stack got thicker, right? Many layers, right? From today at the top, we are talking about these things called agents, right? Which are like the work generators to the stack and eventually to the piece of silicon, right? Between an agent and an atom.
Yes.
Okay. There is so many layers of abstraction that are sitting, right? So first to answer the question, when I say re-architecting from atoms to agents, our key observation, and this is the kind of the probably most visionary or most profound thing we'll have in this whole discussion, is in the world where agents are the primary work generators, the way they talk to atoms, which is silicon, like and stuff, will change. They don't need to talk through Python. See, all these intermediate languages we created them for humans to program, right? For you and I to write a Python program. But when it is agent that is generating work, there will be new, more efficient forms of communication where agent can talk to what I call kind of nano agents in silicon directly. I'll give you an even more concrete example. Much of AI, right, you take any inference model or even the training loop, you can express it in a single page of math equations, single page of linear algebra, equations and some nonlinear terms in between. Why am I taking a math equation, breaking it down to thousands and thousands and thousands of lines of code through the whole layers of stack and asking, eventually the atoms to go wiggle and perform a math computation for me? What if the future hardware just talks math? I can tell them, hey, here is the math equation and here is my data. Go execute. Why did I need Python in between? Right? Why did I need all this language infrastructure in between? Today, I know why I need that. There's lots of kind of in this stuff, but that's where that is the vision we see where things will go with this stuff, right? So, but for that to happen, okay, for to realize this vision, we needed to take a perspective, right? In OXMIQ Labs and the people we hired and I'm working with are, hey, you got to understand all these layers, right, and the stuff, and think in the terms of, right, that this notion of an agent, which is a work generator, wiggling something in silicon, right, without all these overheads in between. And that's the vision. Whether we'll get there, is that too ambitious? So we set out some pragmatic, practical approaches. That's why we do OXPython, which actually lives in the current ecosystem, right, and the stuff. So we believe we have to put some bridges, but this eventual thing, I believe, is going to happen. Whether we have a role to play, I hope, we are one of the catalysts for this vision of the agents talking to nano agents in silicon and eliminating a lot of the legacy software stack. But it is going to happen because the proof, and may happen even sooner than I project, because I've been amazed with the latest reasoning models on their ability to understand even new languages that they never seen before in their training data set, right? So with constraints where, and I did this experiment myself actually over a weekend, I made, the Cloud Code generate the entire transformer network on a fictional ISA that I created, new, instruction set architecture for a new processor. And what I wanted to do was basically, hey, can I execute the entire transformer network on ISA? Can you generate ISA for me, through, through inference model, right? And I was able to generate tokens, right, by the end of the day on the ISA simulator that I did. It took lots of hand-holding, lots of kind of, adjustments and all. But the fact that I could run a model on a brand new instruction set architecture with no intermediate languages, no Python in between, no anything in there, I said, this can happen in real time, right? There'll be, these tiny models, that can run in nanosecond inference that will be embedded inside somebody's silicon, right? And so you can actually talk directly to, that dude or dudette that sits in hardware. You just imagine that there is a dude or dudette in there inside the silicon, and the big guy, the agent on a specific task, is just talking, and they can also establish their own protocols, right? Like the MCP stuff. It's like, hey, what do you understand, dude, in the stuff? Oh, I understand math equations. If you in the stuff, okay, so they can establish protocols too. So anyway, that's kind of what I mean by architecting, atoms to agents. And at atomic level or at the foundational level, and this is, one of the talks I give to, universities and all is, when this happens, the value of physical elements, your chip and your, stuff increases 100x because, see, right now, the value, yes, there is value for silicon, but it's covered behind this value of all the software stack, which is why, like you say, oh yeah, NVIDIA's value is so much because they're not just, flops and watts. They also have the software stack. But in the age where the software stack, this intermediate software stack is, kind of disintermediated, right? Your value of, every 10%, 1% improvement you do at your silicon level, right? And if you deliver me 10% lower power, 10% higher performance, or 10% lower cost, your value is amplified because it's not being, lost in all of these other overheads. So the value of moving forward in physics, whether it is new materials that some of our friends are working on, right? New analog computing, photonics computing, whatever, things that you do is amplified.
Right.
So I advise many engineers and students in universities is hey, either you're working at the physics and math level or you're working at the top kind of, application level delivering services. If you're working in the middle layers, you're taking a risk because the middle layers may be decimated, right? May not exist in the stuff, right? So I encourage more people to get, down to, the physics of semiconductors, the physics and also the math elements, because I think the algorithmic innovations that will happen, we are still at the very early stages of it, right? Why am I running the entire 1 trillion, parameter model to generate every token, right? And it just seems, every token, we're just going through the entire network and generating the next token. Seems like intuitive, they're people way smarter than us will come up with some new mathematical formation that is more efficient than that. But those brains need to, come out, right? The next set of mathematical genius, and that person could be sitting anywhere. The other reason why I want to enable, this whole IP and all to anywhere, and it could be the next generation, Srinivas Ramanujan, that is born in some village that would formulate the next mathematical, transformation of this whole thing that we are doing very brute force, right? And that history has proven that type of innovation is never concentrated. It won't, if it happened in San Francisco Bay Area, it's this or it is that. The foundational reformulations have been, can come from anywhere. Who knows where that next genius is, and they might be already born, and if we give them the right tools, they might come up with this, the next invention.
Solution. So just to summarize, so you're not shipping chips at the end of the day. What you're doing is you're licensing GPU software IP.
Yeah.
Is that also hardware IP or just software IP now?
No, hardware IP.
Hardware as well?
RTL format.
RTL format.
So, one interesting thing now, coming back to the chiplet discussion. So, moving forward, the IP model is evolving, right? So, we used to deliver IP in, two forms, right? One is, soft IP form, and the customer takes and, synthesizes it, and we may help them do that. Then there is also hard IP form, like a GDS delivered to customer, and there are different pricing on that. And increasingly, we have now opportunity to deliver IP in a chiplet form too. So we have some customers say, I have other things my design team is doing. If you can deliver with these specs, right, with these interfaces that you work, you can get the chiplet done and do the tape out, bring it back, and kind of give it to us. They'll pay more, right? It costs me more to do a chiplet because they are masks, wafers, and others, but I make more too. So we, in our roadmap, we do intend to deliver to customers that need chiplets to, basically our IP packaged inside a chiplet. So that's part of our business model. So it's still IP, but the containerization, the packaging of the IP is evolving now to include chiplets is the meta part.
So, why this model versus fabless? Fabless silicon. And I think, another important question to follow up with that as well. And it'll be very important for any investor that's watching this is what does success look like then?
Okay. So, I think I covered that before, right? So fabless model in the sense that, I'm building a quote unquote a GPU with some spec, right? Some name and the stuff and taking that to the market. It's, let's...
It's more you've got a democratic way of doing
Yeah, right. And the stuff because,
so you just want to help anyone that wants to create their own GPU. You're the arm of the GPU.
There are several hundred, if not getting to thousands of design teams that can tape out a chip now, right? Across the world.
Yes.
Okay. They can assemble, spec, and tape out a chip. We want to enable that. So what happened in the mobile space, embedded space and all, because ARM was available for license, different scales of ARM cores. So the number of chips that got done by so many design teams everywhere, including big companies like, Apple was able to design their own chip for a phone because we could license ARM, right? Imagine the only CPU company was Intel and that was available to us. And to build an iPhone, we had to, go work with Intel to get a low-power chip. iPhone would have never happened for a variety of reasons, right? Because there was ARM, and because, we worked with the design team initially with Samsung, and, then we built our own design team. We could do our own silicon. And this is a very important thing, just if you pause on, the lessons from the mobile and the embedded space is no single chip can fit on everybody's constraints, right? Apple constraints on an iPhone were different than some other smartphones constraints, right? Power, thermal, sensors, what you're doing, right? So the customization, and when we talk about physical AI in the next space, robots and all, that like me doing a single chip that can satisfy everybody is not going to happen. And even in fact, NVIDIA can't cover the entire range. That's why Broadcom built such a successful semi-custom business.
Yeah.
Right? Because one size fits all. So if I go in, chip mode, I have to select a particular business segment. Like I say, okay, I'm going after chips for cars, and I stick there, right? And I'm there, right, in the stuff. But if I go the IP route, I know everybody needs like a CPU, like a GPU, like IP that's compatible with the GPU ecosystem. A car guy needs it. We have a couple of car guys that are, as my customers. And inference guy at the edge needs it. A data center guy may need it. A robotics guy may need it, right? And maybe, who knows, a gaming console guy in future may need it. So we have all of them as our customers. But if I start doing chips, then I select a segment and I stay there. Okay, so that's why that's the difference between these approaches. Now, as far as the second part of the question,
what the success is like?
Yeah, what success looks like, because now the IP. So before, everybody viewed IP business as it's high margin business, but kind of a low top line, right? The total revenues are small. And if there is competition, right, you lower your pricing and all that stuff. But that's evolving because with the chiplet model, right? So with chiplet model, the revenues are actually pretty interesting. They'll go to billions of dollars. We've done the modeling and all, right? And still keep the democratization aspect of it, right? Say, you, Salah, wants to build a big inference, cluster, somewhere. And you have very specifically want to kind of say, hey, my priority is this reasoning models. I want more memory bandwidth. I want to not spend too much money on HBM. I chose, DDR memory, and I need an engine to drive it and say, okay, call OXMIQ Labs and, deliver me, this is the flops that I need and all, and the software stack, and I give you, and you may get the memory controller chiplet and IO chiplet from somebody else, or you do it your own, because you may, if you have some, key IP on your own, and build your own, data center with it.
Yeah.
And you may save 10x than, buying merchant silicon from NVIDIA from that, right? And this last point for investors and all, it's actually the whole game changed going back to the first discussion we had. See, when my capital expense to procure on hardware exceeds $1 billion, right? I said 1 gigawatt is $30 billion.
30 billion, yeah.
I'm even putting, bring that down to $1 billion, okay, this stuff. A cost of a tape out of a chip is between 50 to 100, depending on, most advanced node versus, right, 2 nodes before. In the range, depending on the fabs, I can tape out a chip, right, between $30 million all the way to $100 million, right? And then say double it for packaging it and testing it and all, $200 million. I can have my own product for $200 million. I can, if tomorrow, if Salah wants your own chip and say, Raja, can you build me a chip, state of the art something, and you say, I'll give you 200 million NRE, I'll get you your own chip. Okay, that meets a particular stuff. Now, the 200 million used to look very large, right? Oh my God, $200 million to do a chip. But when my capital expense crossed billion for my data center, 200 million looks small. So, do I spend $30 billion procuring and the stuff? So 200 million is tiny for this 100 gigawatt stuff. That's why our model is so powerful. The timing from that standpoint is excellent, because when the capital spend is going to literally trillions of dollars, right? Anyone can imagine now I can get my own silicon because I can eliminate all the margins that are there in the stuff. So if you can commission as a data center guy, and I know you're in the region you're in, there are many, data centers coming up. If they say, hey, why can't I get my own chip? What would it cost me my own chip to be there, in the stuff? Like I said, it is in hundreds of millions of dollars. And when I'm spending billions of dollars, hundreds of million is small percentage. If I'm spending less than $1 billion, then, I go buy merchant silicon because the cost, the stuff beside is. So I think the economics is changing right in front of us. The economics of silicon are when these things are going to, each gigawatt data center is costing them $50 billion.
Yeah. Tell us more about, OXCORE, for example, that you have, and if you could explain the modular philosophy behind it as well for people who are not aware of what OXCORE is about.
OXCORE is a result of, a set of things that I had since 2009. Okay, it's almost 16 years baking in my head that it all stems from the desire to move the hardware software abstraction a few levels up, right? And couldn't quite kind of insert these ideas into my time at AMD and even my time at Intel, because fundamental re-architecture was not an option. Because at AMD we had very good that we survived with our game console business with the existing IP. So we had to do incremental changes on existing architecture. At Intel, I thought I had the opportunity to create or, do something from scratch, which is kind of one of the attractions on why I went to Intel, because they didn't have a GPU program. But And again, this is a lesson for me in hindsight. When we got the exascale supercomputer design, so, there's a long history of Intel and exascale. They were working from 2012. Okay, so I joined Intel late 2017, 2018. So 6 years prior to that, Intel committed to Argonne to build their exascale computer. And Intel changed on them 3 times. They started on, the Larrabee Xeon Phi. They canceled that. There was an intermediate architecture called GSA. They canceled on that. And, because inside Intel, deprioritization of stuff. And it came to a point where basically, and national supercomputers are beyond money making, right? It was more a responsibility to help U.S. have this stuff. And there was a third time they canceled, and they were, the government people at National Labs were very, very upset at Intel and this stuff. And Bob Swan became the CEO at the time, and Bob said, hey, we shouldn't look at the money aspect of this stuff, right? Whatever it is, right? Let's do it. And the closest engine in our roadmap that could meet the exascale requirements was the GPU, thing that I started from scratch on. And they liked it, and they said, let's get it done. But the time scale for this thing was very small. So again, I had to start with a starting point, which was our integrated graphics IP, and scale it up, right? For practical stuff. So anyway, long story short, I just said I compromised my vision of doing something clean slate, and a big company doing clean slate is always very difficult, right? And with timelines. So kind of now fast forward, I have no legacy, no revenues, right? No existing customers to satisfy. So much of those, core clean slate ideas are put into OXCORE, right? And it evolved, right? When you start actually kind of building, you start kind of discovering, and the world of workloads has evolved from 2009 as well. Some fundamentals have changed the same. The matrix engine or the tensor or the, that workload only happened post AI. But the scalar workload and the SIMT or vector workload remain the same. So OXCORE is the amalgamation of the ideas, but it's a clean slate, architecture from scratch.
I want to go now to the next part, which is OXPython. So you've announced a path to run Python-based CUDA applications on non-NVIDIA hardware with no code changes as well. So could you elaborate more? We had a little bit of a discussion at the beginning. How does OXPython achieve this? And where are the limits today?
Right. So, first thing is that OXPython is now no longer a block diagram or a plan, right? We are shipping it on Tensor hardware and Tensor systems and all. And like I said earlier, the way we achieve it is, OXPython is an install. We capture or we intercept at the Python interpreter level and say, these things are tensor operations that are going through kind of CUDA abstractions, and send it down. So we have a queuing model. It's a queue-based architecture. What we do is we capture the math operations or any operations, early on, and we queue it down to the next layer. We call it the hardware layer. And in the hardware layer, we have plugins for different hardware, right? So there's a tenstorrent dequeuer, right? So that it picks those commands and says, you're trying to do multiply and add. And we call the tenstorrent TT metal library and say, can we map these high-level abstractions down to tenstorrent hardware? So similarly, we have plugins for Intel, AMD. Actually, one of the things that I don't know when your podcast will be published. It may be the first time I say this. Because of my, passion and, my favorite development platform is still the Mac that is here. I actually did myself did a Apple, Apple backend to run on Apple GPUs. So we can run all this kind of, CUDA-based models on Apple Mac as well. So I'm still looking at an opportunity, when to put that out. In fact, that may be the first public release of OXPython I would do that is outside the TensorFlow platform. So yeah, that's kind of, what we did. Now, it is not, because the Python ecosystem and the whole stack, it is not a watertight abstraction. What I mean by that is because it's open source and there are so many toolkits that can kind of do various things. They're still, we cover, I call it like kind of 90% of the, the CUDA infestation. And there is new CUDA infestation that comes and new domain-specific libraries that are being launched every day by NVIDIA, by others and all. So there's still, coverage problems you will see. So that's basically, the long kind of version of what we have accomplished.
With regards to the recent announcement that you did, which was the OXCapsule beta, could you share more, first of all, what is OXCapsule first, and then give us an update on how the beta version is going?
Yeah. No, so what OXCapsule, it's a tool, by the way, it's a tool we live by every day at Oxmiq Labs. Recently, with the NVIDIA, they call it the digits box, the Spark box. Okay, they launched that with a piece of software called Sync. SYNC. For people who follow that, you can think of OXCapsule as Sync, but it works on NVIDIA and everybody else's hardware too. Okay, that's one. High level stuff. Now I'll get into the kind of the
just before you go into that. So let's say, for example, you got something from you've already got TensorStorrent as an example. Do you also do test runs on the other ones like Grok and Cerebrus and
not true? So we prioritize hardware that we can get our hands on and install in our in our company downstairs. You might have seen the thing, or we have a colo data center. We haven't yet prioritized or kind of, put Capsule on people who operate it as a cloud. Because, the things, people who are abstracted on a cloud-like interfaces have authentication and cloud logins. And so there's friction. So I say, and I'll get to actually I'll answer that question, because first, what Capsule is, it almost, more or less gives you access to heterogeneous hardware as if it is connected to your personal PC. So if I am on a Mac and I want to develop on TensorStorrent, let's just say, you want to write a program, test a program on TensorStorrent. You can do that in just one single command. You are on the TensorStorrent machine, okay? And, it's almost like you're locally developing it. And, you can do lots of things. You can deploy models. You can write new Python code. You can even rewrite TensorStorrent drivers, their open source stack. You can do whatever you want in kind of single click. Now, you might ask, hey, isn't that is it like a terminal access, like a SSH, right? If I have a TensorStorrent machine and I can, remote log into it with SSH protocol, I can do all of this stuff, right? So are you just like a glorified SSH or lower friction SSH? To some extent, that's true, right? So we simplify that you don't need to know IP addresses. You don't need to know machine. I can just say Capsule connect to TensorStorrent black hole, and I'm just on a TensorStorrent black hole hardware. Okay, you didn't know exactly which machine, and also we have a scheduler that hooks you up, and your storage all your files and all go along with you, no matter which hardware. So we removed like a machine-specific, connection. You can also connect to it. We also removed all the friction. If the machine is sitting inside my building and inside my VPN, or do I have to log in through a VPN and then connect and all? No, we operate outside the firewalls. And so NVIDIA Sync also does this for NVIDIA, that widgets box
On the spot.
and the stuff, right? So you can access, if you bought the box and say you have it in your office in Dubai or whatever, and here you are, you can access it, right? And you can run programs directly on it. And so that is the kind of the first level of Capsule. But there is one more thing about Capsule, which is, nobody else does, is we not only do compute access to your compute, but also pixel access. So what I mean by that is if you have, let's say, an NVIDIA 5090 GPU or an AMD Radeon GPU or Intel Arc GPU in your infrastructure, and you installed, Windows on it, let's just say, right, or Linux desktop on it. And for this applies to Macs too. I can also get full desktop visual access to it, right? So with the same infrastructure, so I can run a graphics application or a game, right? I can launch Cyberpunk, 2077 on it, and I can be gaming on my Mac on this stuff, or launch, Blender and do 3D modeling and editing on it, or launch Maya on it, or, Photoshop on it and all that stuff. So your portable computer or your Mac has access to your entire computational infrastructure that sits in your office or or in our back office and the stuff. So all of those features are available in Capsule. And like I said, the key is a scheduling layer. Now, the root of the Capsule technology came from our time at Intel, right? So we built an infrastructure called Endgame for cloud gaming. And in fact, Intel, launched it with a few key game developers at a large scale. But Intel shut that thing down, when they were refocusing. They shut down various kind of, ancillary projects that they were working on. So when I left Intel, right, I approached Intel and, got the team and the source code and the license to it, right? So that's called Endgame technology. And we continued iterating, we rewrote it and all that stuff. But the core scheduler and lots of the lessons learned came, from Intel. And Intel is actually a shareholder or safe note holder in my company. So they're an investor in us because of the IP. So they're in-kind investor. And they have also built several, I think 300 discrete GPU-based server platforms. Some of them are Intel cards and half of them are Intel GPUs, half of them are NVIDIA GPUs for testing the stuff. So since they weren't using them, they have given us those 300 servers as well as part of the their investment into us. So we have like over 200 GPUs running in our cluster, and Capsule is the interface to get them. And so that's basically what Capsule is. So it's an orthogonal product, and the main job it does is for a developer, it reduces the friction to get access to a GPU.
So could you walk a developer from pip install to first speed up? So for example, where do they land first? Do they go with Tensor, other accelerators? Do they go CPUs or GPUs?
Yeah. So in the first beta we launched, we have Tensor hardware, some NVIDIA, some AMD, some Intel. I don't know if you put the Mac to public access or not. I have to look. I mean, you can download and you can install. So it's and then if you say Capsule list, it'll show raw all the hardware you have access to. It'll list and the stuff. So the pip install stuff is you need to install the client. That's all, right? Which is free client, right? Once you register, on our site. The beta program, we're running a controlled beta program where you make a request because, we only have limited number of GPUs. And the initial users, we also want to, get feedback from them. And, obviously this is the first time we're putting it out, so we'll have some bugs and others to deal with. So you can register and, and somebody will send you a link to the client download. And once you install the client, you're off to the races, and you can just do. So in terms of the scheduler, where we prioritize, because the first round we want the initial users, we expect to be kind of people who are familiar with their hardware and they know what they're doing, right? And so we are giving access to startups and some students who are GPU nerds and all. Even though we have a scheduler, and if you just say, hey, capsule connect and land me any arbitrary stuff, it will land you someplace. But most of the usages, they are explicitly asking for, I want to connect to tensor and black hole, okay? And they'll get black hole. Or I want a NVIDIA 5090, and they'll get a 5090, right? And they can also be explicit about, I want specifically this machine in the list that in the stuff, right? I want to kind of in this, a specific machine too. They can do that. So we give them all levels of control today, right? But when an enterprise licenses capsule from us and they want to deploy it for their own engineers or artists or developers or, AI people, we give them flexibility to do the scheduler that suits their policy. So the idea is our monetization model with Capsule is business to business. So, for example, if you're running a AI development house and you have some 100 engineers and you have your own local infra, we'll give you the server license for some fee and some maintenance fee, but you set the policies yourself, right? On how you want to allocate. For example, if you have few very high-end Blackwell GPUs and a lot of kind of, low-end ones, you want to make sure that everyone wants just the high-end and hog that, right? And this stuff. So you want to, schedule and control that. So you have ability to do that, but the policy should be set by the administrator, right? So we will set some policies for our infrastructure, but for your infrastructure, you set the policies.
So OXMIQ, is clearly proud of the partnership with Tenstorrent, right? We've heard it several times here. So were you at AMD when Jim was there, or?
Oh yeah, of course.
You were at the same time.
Yes.
So what would be interesting then is what made that a compelling platform, first platform actually, and what's next?
Yeah. Oh, what made Tenstorrent a compelling platform?
Yeah.
Like I mentioned. First, that, anytime partnerships are, there needs to be a need, right, on both sides, right, and the stuff. So they definitely had the need to get help from us from mapping, more of the models much faster, and OXPython was a good tool to do that. And second, my understanding of their architecture, their hardware, I was very close to Tenstorrent. I was on their board, for a year as well. So know, the gory details of their architecture and all. So before we dived in, I got a understanding of their software stack and the challenges. So that's what made it a good first partnership. With the next set of partnerships, we have, several in the works. Nothing, I can, state publicly yet, but the criteria is the same, right? Do we understand your architecture? Do we understand your existing software stack? And, then we can, sign the contract and try to enable you, right? So right now we have more people at our door for partnerships, then I have resources to engage. So
which leads me to the next question.
Right.
You are now raising Seed A. Is it Seed A now?
No, Series A.
Series A, yeah, Series A, yeah. So, what's that? Seed A, sorry.
Yeah.
It's the jet lag. You're a Series A right now. How much are you raising now?
For the next round,
The next round,
we're raising another 30.
another 30. So you've done 20 million. So now it'll be 50 million. So it'll be classed basically a Series A plus, right?
Yeah.
You've also got strategic partnerships with MediaTek, for example. What capability or market access does or will that strategic money unlock for Oxmiq?
MediaTek is a great partner, and it's a big name, and and they do a lot of investments in this space, right? Whether they are directly relevant to their roadmap or not, they have historically. I mean, this is public knowledge. You can go see that MediaTek investment group invests in various interesting startups. And what the problem we are working on and the team right was definitely intriguing for them, and in terms of I mean, it's too early to say, right, that when our IP is in production and all, what kind of doors MediaTek would open and all, but that's few things we look forward to. They are have excellent reputation of execution on SoCs. One of the top SoC design teams in the world sits for Taiwan, right, and stuff. So we're looking forward to, when our IP is in a more mature state, that they could be one of our customers. But that is nothing to do with the investment. So the investment is investment. Winning them as a customer, we have to win them like we have to win any other customer, right? So it doesn't. These are orthogonal stuff.
So I think with any when you mention the word scale, in our game it's talent, right? What disciplines are you finding the hardest to hire for the mission that you're doing now? Is it like is it from a memory systems perspective, verification, as you mentioned earlier, ML systems, and how do you intend to grow them?
Yeah. Top talent and in any of the fields is always hard. Okay, so no field is easy, right? Of the stuff that up and down the spec. Electrical, engineers, semiconductor engineers that have, the not only the knowledge, perspective, and the mindset to innovate at the physics level are hard to find. Partly because, there are lots of big numbers, particularly when I go to, place like India, got lots of trained hardware engineers. But the past 10 plus years, they have been trained on tools in the sense like, operators of tools of like, the existing EDA design tools and all. But when you're trying to do that order of magnitude, like say, hey, can I get 2x? Can I get 3x? Can I get 10x? You need that mindset that really kind of, can think beyond the black boxes they are operating, that stuff. So those are always hard to find. And sometimes you might find them in fresh university graduate than an experienced person that would just kind of, just things from first principles. So every layer has been hard. But at the same time, the AI tools and the what they are able to do is also a great amplifier for us, right? So one of the things I said in another interview is the value of the gray hairs and the bald heads has increased by 10x, if not 100x now. This is because these the new tools in experienced hands can do a lot more, right? And so you need an open mind. The convolution of gray hairs, bald heads, and a open, curious mind on to push these things to limit. These tools are like very eager junior engineer that is fresh graduate, has a lot of knowledge but no experience, right? So they are playing the role of those junior engineers in experienced hands, right? Cloud Code, Codex CLIs, Geminis, Kimi K2s, all of them are, particularly impressive for automating a whole bunch of stuff that we relied on hundreds of engineers. Okay.
Wow.
But they can't, they're, people who think that, they can, create a new architecture or create a new code base and all, they'll waste their time. They pretend to do that stuff, but, they are much more useful in the hands of the stuff. So talent, I think, will be a challenge. It's a very interesting dichotomy. On one hand, you'll hear all this stuff that AI will be replacing all the jobs, right? Or AI will have a massive stuff. And on the other hand, we'll also find that we'll still have a huge talent gap. Okay. And I think both statements are true from different angles. So great question, whether it's here in US or, Middle East or India or Singapore, Malaysia, and of course, China, right? Even though, we have some obstacles on the stuff, we have to go where talent is, right? We have to kind of, and also train them, teach them and all that stuff. So it's a major issue.
Handle.
Yeah.
With regards to the future outlook, I mean, what are the top two technical de-risks that you want behind you in the next, 18 to 24 months? And also what would be
behind? Okay.
Yeah.
The first one, which we are kind of executing, and we are months away from, but it still needs to be behind us, that a full end-to-end software stack executing on our hardware IP, right, unchanged, right, in the stuff. We hit some very interesting milestones, but we have things ahead of us on that. That would be the main technical stuff. Now the second one on that is getting enough performance modeling and performance analysis done in pre-silicon framework, down to the, femtojoules, that level, so that we are both, generality, compatibility times performance is hitting world class and the stuff, right? Because the bar set by, NVIDIA is very high, right? Even, that on both, right? People just think it's just, software, but they are one of the best hardware execution engines, right? That's why all the other startups struggle to compete with them, not just because of software ecosystem moats. Even if we cross the moats, just on fundamental hardware, they are very impressive, right? So you have to hit, your flops per millimeter, flops per watt, those sort of stuff in a world-class manner. So that's the second one that we have to cross.
So if CUDA-based Python workloads can run broadly across vendors, how does that change competition and pricing and innovation cadence from your perspective?
First, it reduces the friction for all the new operators of these multi-gigawatt centers to try, other silicon, right, and bring forward. I think in the short run, it is additive. In the short run, I say, because the demand so far exceeds the supply, ability to make all these workloads, right, run friction-free on other hardware will enable actually, that the opportunity that NVIDIA still leaves on the table to be captured productively, right? So right now, people are installing this other hardware-based infrastructures, but not many workloads are going there, right? Their utilization and all is still, patchy from what I can understand. They're getting installed and all. From what I can see, the workload is still dominated going to NVIDIA. I think the efforts that we're doing and all will increase the other stuff. I think long run competition, like I said, right, it is today $35 billion for a gigawatt. We can't serve the entire world at that cost structure. My business tokenomics doesn't work, right, for delivering tokens at a price that India can consume. These things have to come down to single-digit $1 billion, right, rapidly within the next 5 years. And for that, that alternate and everyone needs to be, be able to do their own tape outs, right? So if you go to the fundamental math, and, this is another, long talk, on what does a wafer cost, right? And what's the wafer price? So it really comes down to what is the wafer cost, what is the wafer price, right? And what me as a design guy, I put a margin on top, right? And the stuff. And like I said, it is joules to tokens.
Yeah,
right?
It goes hand.
And the cost of the conversion engine, amortization over 2 years or 4 years, 3 years or 4 years, right? It's a very, straightforward, math that you could do. Our mutual friends at, the analysts like Semi-Analysis do a good job with their calculators on all of this stuff, right? If you go look at them, you can really see where things need to go, right, for this to play out. So anyway, I think I don't think right now with the demand there is and all that it has to come at cost of NVIDIA, right? I think that NVIDIA will continue to grow and will be very, very successful for a long time, and I think the rest of the ecosystem can also grow
alongside it. Yeah. So, what's one practical piece of advice that you have for teams trying to marry new compute IP with a developer-first software stack?
Understand the developer from their abstractions first, not your abstractions. So this is the earlier point I made. As a hardware company, we all, I fall in the trap too, just that I just have more scars on my back, right? More to be able to, say this to all of you. It's not that we were born with it, which is basically our software abstraction is just the layer above us, and we start thinking the developers are just who programs to your software abstraction, right? You got to start it at at the data science level, at the, what are they programming with? That is, the sooner you understand that, the smarter choices you'll make, because if not, you start from every layer, it's boiling the ocean. It is so much to do. It feels like you never can get it done, right? So, there are some shortcuts will be available to you if you start from what is the developer really doing, right, and this stuff, and those are necessary because, man, there's so they're not just one thing. There's VLLM, there is SGLang, there is this, there is that, and every day there's somebody else creates a new infrastructure. Or the Stanford guys did Thunder Kittens, and so every week there are 5 new interfaces popping up in software. So you can be completely distracted in chasing so many different things, and it's hard not to, because it seems the most important, this hype cycles, because the social media amplifications of this thing, we live in a world because of, the access to information. It's suddenly like, every week there is something new, and it's like, oh, I worked hard on this stuff and nobody's talking about that anymore.
Yeah, no, listening to
now shifted, and this is the channel. Even with my friends at Tenstrant and all, it's everybody says this, so then you're in this perennial like half-baked things that, I have 6 half-baked things that I worked on.
Yeah.
And
Well, now the shift is going into quantum these days, right? It's all about quantum chips these days, quantum computing. Raja, we definitely need to do another podcast. And I'd like to do it after your raise that happens, because there's far more many questions that I would love to ask you. But due to the timing situation, if there was one message, and if listeners remember only one thing about Oxmiq and your vision for the GPU's future, what should it be?
It's a tough question to answer, but one thing, about Oxmiq, remember us when the vision of this agents to nano agents materializes, be a profound change in the entire way the whole ecosystem works, the hardware, software ecosystem works. So that's the agents to nano agents, and think agents to atoms.
Marvelous. Agents to atoms. I think that's going to be the name of this podcast, Raja. Raja, thank you for joining us on this Semiconductor Leadership Podcast. Sincerely appreciate it. A lot of golden nuggets, but there is much more for us to dig in. I wish you all the best with the next raise, and
I wish maybe the next podcast we actually do it in your home base.
You're more than welcome. Yes. In the Gulf, where the data centers are being pushed in. I mean, I think yesterday I was invited. I just unfortunately my flight wasn't matched to make it to DC. But you heard the announcements with Trump and the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia. The investment went from 600 billion now to 1 trillion, and they said, what's going to be what is it going into?
Yeah,
and the first thing he said was AI.
Yeah.
So I don't know if he's referring to the buzzword that we spoke about early on or data centers, and I think it is mainly data centers.
Yeah, of course.
So,
of course.
It's
a trillion is just 20 gigawatts or something like that.
Well, it's amazing how you did the calculation that it's actually 5 trillion.
Yeah, 5 trillion
for the forecast.
Yeah, for the forecast.
Even 1 trillion is not enough. Can you imagine? Thank you, Raja. To everyone that's tuned in to the Semiconductor Leadership Podcast, thank you for joining us today. If you want to learn more about Oxmiq, you can click the website right here. And you can get access to what they're working on right now. If you want to get more information directly about Oxmiq, you can also reach out to Raja on LinkedIn. Remember, at the end of the day, it takes a village to raise a chip. So it takes subscribers to raise this podcast. So hit that subscribe button. Thank you for joining us. And take care for now and see you on the next episode. Bye for now.